On 1019 WDET, I'm Tia Graham. The Museum of Contemporary Arts Detroit is celebrating 20 years in 2026. As part of its anniversary, the museum is undergoing renovations and will remain closed until 2026. Next year, MOCAD will reopen with the theme of Radical Imagination, Intersectional Futures. The anniversary program will honor MOCAD's roots as a site for civic and community engagement. But until the space reopens, MOCAD will host exhibitions and shows at the Mike Kelly Mobile Homestead. And right now, Heartland, a solo exhibition by Detroit-based artist Mary Ann Monforto, is on display, and it is free and open to the public. Joining us in studio to talk more about renovations, new exhibitions, and 20 years of MOCAD is Jova Lynn. She's the co-director of the museum. Jova, welcome back to the Metro.
Thank you for having me, Tia. It's always a pleasure.
Of course. So it is currently closed, MOCAD. We see all the cranes and construction crews as you walk by. What kind of renovations are happening and how is it going?
So it's been an exciting time for us at MOCAD. For those of you who have visited us before, you might know that we are usually open year-round. We are closed for the next at least 6 months for these renovations that include, when you drive down Woodward, a huge window so you can see inside the museum.
Yes.
Which is going to be transformative for us. For some of you who also have visited before, you will notice that it will be nice and cool when you come in because we'll have HVAC, which is really exciting. So we're doing a bunch of upgrades. So we have that window, we have some interior work, the cafe space is going to be totally different. I think it's going to feel like a really new and exciting time for MOCAD, especially after 20 years of being in this building.
Exactly. And why is 20 years so special for MOCAD? Because you can do any anniversary that you want to, but 20 years.
So I think I go back to MOCAD's origin story a lot. And MOCAD was co-founded by Marcia Myro, who is a former critic for the Detroit Free Press. She was an art critic, snaps to her. Julia Reyes-Taubman and a gallerist called Suzanne Feld-Hilberry. And so they sort of came together and were like, Detroit needs a contemporary art museum. And I don't even know how much blood, sweat, and tears went into this effort, right? So for it to be 20 years and MOCAD is still standing. And I say this to say to listeners that MOCAD was built on a labor of love, a love for Detroit, a love for contemporary art, where these three women got together and were like, we need to make something happen. So 20 years later, it feels like we're kind of like the little engine that could. And so after all these years celebrating year 20, I don't know if you call it the silver anniversary, feels timely.
Feels timely. And as someone who has made it their mission, especially as you have come on as co-director in the last few years, it's been your mission to improve connections with MOCAD in the community. I think about the renovations, but I also just think about some of the other exhibitions you plan on bringing in, especially when you have your 20th anniversary.
Yeah.
In what ways do you see all of this adding to your goals?
Wow, that's a big question, Tia. So, so our show, we're headlining with an exhibition by Oluwami Dabbles. So for those of you who don't know, Dabbles is a longtime artist in Detroit. He is also the founder and creator behind the African Bead Museum.
Yes.
And so we're opening with him, an exhibition by Carol Harris, who's also a Detroiter, is over at the Park Shelton, has been here in Detroit for years and years and is an incredible fiber-based artist. And we're pairing that with Martha Misko, who is also a very talented artist who's actually currently co-artist in residence up at Cranbrook. And so together, this sort of tells a story of Detroit that to me feels like I'm trying to forge the networks of connection. And by having these artists, especially, I have to say, Dabbles and Carol, Dabbles show, who I first met Dabbles maybe in 2010 on a visit to Detroit before I even moved here in 2015. And just to know this is his first solo museum show and the trust he has in me and the team in MOCAD to do this feels like sort of a braid that's being woven together. And so Carol Harris's show, I do want to shout out because this is an extension of our program with Gallery 7. And so I think a couple times ago when I was here, I was talking about Gallery 7,
yes,
which is a gallery that Charles McGee, the late, great Detroit artist, founded. And Carol Harris's first show was up in Gallery 7.
Wow.
And so one of our associate curators, Abel has been working on sort of parsing out. He worked really hard on that exhibition, is parsing out the legacy. And so bringing Carol in for that, and, you know, thinking about the younger, more emerging artists at the same time with Martha Show, feels like to reopen with these three heavy hitters, to think about the creative ecosystem here on the ground and giving people flowers when they're due, feels like, I mean, you asked the question, like, how is this a part of the legacy? This is exactly what I want to be doing. And having this upgraded building to do that in is so exciting.
I can just feel the excitement radiating off of you. Just thinking about the African Beat Museum and hearing you say this is the first time he's going to be in a solo exhibition in his career.
So he hasn't had a solo museum show in decades. This is his first like solo museum retrospective.
Yes.
Which a retrospective is like a look at his entire career history. So something that's really interesting about Dobbles that many people maybe don't know is that he started off at the African American Museum as their curator and first artist in residence before they were the Charles H. Wright.
Yeah, when they were on Grand Boulevard.
When they were on Grand Boulevard, just making a museum happen out of those houses on the boulevard. He was a big part of that. So we're sort of encapsulating his career from before then until now. And that is something to see the artist trajectory, to see his transformation. Dobbles, you can see his artwork not just at the Bean Museum, but like driving around Detroit, period. There are murals everywhere. We're going to start on a mural actually when the building reopens. So his show will open first, and then there'll be an outside edition later on when it gets a little warmer. Yeah. And so to have this like moment for him, I mean, Dobbles he's not an institutionalist. So it's like, he's glad it's happening. We're working together on it. But it's also, I think, for me and for the public to celebrate Detroit in this way and the artistry and this legend who has contributed so much feels important in terms of art history and the larger sort of creative ecosystem, because Detroit is a home where art history is made, and Dobbles is part of that.
Jova, just building on that, I've been able to just learn a lot more about the arts and culture scene in Detroit, especially in the 60s and the 70s, where there was this huge, just, I guess you can say, renaissance of Black artists and artistry. And there were galleries and there were art shows and art festivals, and there were so many different things. And Dobbles, of course, was, you know, they're part of these type of stories. Mm-hmm. What does it feel like to bring those type of stories to the new younger generations, or even just learn something new yourself about things that were happening in the city? Like you said, Detroit it makes art history.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's funny because I was just actually thinking about this when I was waiting to come on. Like, artists are so important forever, but especially right now. And to know history and to know the patterns of history. You know, one thing that I truly believe artists do is they interpret what's happening in the now and our time. And what we're seeing now in the world, in the nation, in Detroit is not necessarily dissimilar from the time you're talking about.
Exactly.
Where like 60s, 70s, there was a lot going on. And I think it's important for me that we have opportunities for people of all ages to have that reflection, right? Where we can have this moment to sit and think about, like, this isn't an interpretation of culture as it is now. And so I think having opportunities, I have to really just shout out to the whole MOCAD team, because we literally picked up the work from Dobbles in advance of the winter. That's how like real we are right now. And putting together educational programs, putting together interpretive programs, and really making a season that is cohesive. So when we reopen, people could see the history and the moment and also reflect on the now and what is going on.
We're talking about MOCAD renovations and celebrating 20 years in 2026. Our guest is Jova Land. She is MOCAD's co-director. And Jova, I do want to talk to you about, of course, the gala. Mm-hmm. It is 20 years. You're looking back, but we're also paving the way for the future. And the one thing that I found so interesting was some of the folks who are going to be honored at this gala, which one of those names includes Dream Hampton.
Yeah.
So if you can, just talk a little bit about the gala, the long list of honorees you all have, and, you know, what folks can expect.
So we have our gala, which happens every year, but this year's a little different because we're off-site because we're close. Mm-hmm. And this year's theme is Phoenix Rising. So we're really thinking about, again, I said the little engine that could, a Phoenix Rising. What does it mean to emerge from a time where you're just sort of like in the ground ideating, and there's a lot that's been happening in the world. There's a lot that's art impacted the arts ecosystem, and we're still here and we're rising. And so we are honoring 5 individuals this year, one of them, of course, being Dream. Dream Hampton is a native Detroiter who's an incredible filmmaker, cultural producer, artist, and just in general human being who I adore. Dream also happens to be on the MOCAD board. Shout out to that. And so Dream is being honored this year. And I don't know if I was here, but a couple years ago, we debuted a piece of hers called Freshwater, which sort of looked at the history of flooding basements in this beautiful experimental film, Flooding Detroit, sort of speculation about the future of Detroit. And so Dream Hampton and her storytelling is such an important part of MOCAD, and we wouldn't be here without her. So that's part of her honoring. We are also honoring Chris Shank, whose solo exhibition we did last year. He is an artist and designer and really is thinking so thoughtfully about community building within his studio practice, which is formerly based out of Hamtramck, actually. And so Chris has given so much to MOCAD and so much to the design world, and we're actually doing a book about his practice. So he will be honored. We are also honoring Carrie Lorne. Shout out to Book Beat, which is Carrie Lorne's shop. If you have not been to Book Beat, please go. Carrie Lorne is one of the most prolific artists coming out of Detroit in terms of art history as well. I'd put him in that category. Carrie is a member of Destroy All Monsters, which actually has a solo show opening up at Cranbrook, or a presentation about that history. That was a group he put together with the artist Mike Kelly, whose Mobile Homestead we're running exhibitions out of. And Jim Shaw, who will also be in the building. Carrie has done so much for the Detroit ecosystem, especially DIY artist spaces, DIY artist aesthetic, punk aesthetic, sort of like that anarchist culture. Carrie has been instrumental in supporting MOCAD's book program, which is going to be taking off like a phoenix next year. So we're excited to honor him. And then we have an artist and cultural entrepreneur who's actually known nationally. His name is John Gray. He's a co-founder of Ghetto Gastro, which is an amazing entity that does a lot around food, community, cultural production as well. John is an artist who I would put in like sort of this realm between social practice, interdisciplinary, and just like doing the work with the people and really stretching what art as a practice can be, and how, to me, it acts as a way to amplify practices of nourishment and what communities need in order to feel fulfilled. And so John is going to be in the building. And then, of course, the Kresge Foundation. Every year we honor a philanthropic entity, and this year it's Kresge. And for MOCAD, Kresge has done so much to show up for us, especially in times of need, especially as thought partners. I want to shout out to Michelle Williams, who is an amazing woman who does so much for the community in Detroit, who we work with very closely at the foundation, who's going to be accepting the award on the foundation's behalf, who I was just with in Minneapolis, and her energy is infectious, and the care she has for our communities runs very deep. There's so many nonprofits who've been impacted by her work and by Kresge's work, and so we got to thank them as well. So this year is really making bridges between who are the people who are making connections across communities, who are people who are doing the work to storytell, who are the people who are amplifying not only the mission of MOCAD, but the things that we care about in terms of our moral compass, right? And that's community, that's knowledge sharing, and that's this thing we call art.
And Jova, we got about 2 minutes left, and I don't want to leave without talking to you about the exhibition that's on hand right now, Heartland, a solo exhibition by Detroit-based artist Mary Ann Monforton. I had that right. Okay.
Monforton, yeah.
Thank you. And so just talk a little bit about that in our last 2 minutes or so, and where people can go to see it.
So Mary Ann was born actually in Windsor, but grew up in Detroit. And so but lived in New York for a long time and was homies with Keith Haring, Basquiat, and just a part of the art scene. And she had her own practice, but then sort of got into writing about art and thinking about art. And so a couple of years ago, she left New York and came back to Detroit to practice. And this show is a very, very funny show. It's full of sculptures, a couple paintings, and really, I would say, acts kind of as an installation that addresses like the humor and the absurdity of luxury, the humor and the absurdity of outer space and like time. And also, I will say, the humor and absurdity of the time we're living in America right now, and sort of like a bit of a critique of this particular political moment and what it will mean, what it means to be American in the now. And so the exhibition is up and free to the public. It is up at Mike Kelly's Mobile Homestead, which is an artwork by the late artist Mike Kelly that we do activations like exhibitions. We're going to be doing a sound residency I'll talk to you about next time, and a couple other things. And so we're super excited to have her work up. It is a very special show. When you walk in, you're given a trophy and an award, and we want you to take selfies and just be a part of the absurdity with us and be in community with us. So it's a very special show.
I love it already. Give me my participation trophy now. I want mine now. Jova Lynn is co-director of MOCAD. MOCAD will remain closed through 2026 for renovations. However, right now it does have an exhibition open at the Mike Kelly Mobile Homestead, and super excited to learn more about whatever else you're going to have happening in 2026 for your 20th anniversary.
Yeah, it's going to be big.
Thanks
I'll
for
be back,
joining
I hope.
us.
Thank you, Tia.
Of course. Coming up, community organizers in Hamtramck are joining forces. The Hamtramck Queer Alliance and Passenger Recovery will join the show to talk about connecting arts, sober living, and queer culture. You all stay right there. This is The Metro.